This is the best damn morning show, period, on Hot Talk 560 KSFO.
By the way, tomorrow in the Silicon Valley, at the Conservative Forum of the Silicon Valley, they meet in Mountain View. You'll be having an opportunity to hear and meet the guy that I consider to be the world's foremost expert on jihad, Islamism, radical Islam, whatever you want to call it. He's Robert Spencer, prolific author. His most recent book, Not Peace But a Sword, The Great Chasm Between Christianity and Islam. Mr. Spencer, always a pleasure to have you with us here on KSFO.
Brian, always a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
There's a story in the news we were talking about earlier, and I really want to bring it up again because now you're here. You know, our allies for peace, as they're called, the Saudis, really serve up a radical brand of Islam. And now we've got one of these Saudi sheikhs out there saying, listen, this new law that's set to come into effect tomorrow, which will finally allow women to drive in Saudi Arabia, he says, we can't allow that to happen because we have studies that prove that when women drive, their ovaries could be ruined. Where do they come up with this stuff?
Well, this is one of the more ludicrous attempts to discourage women from driving that's come out of Saudi Arabia, but it is part of an ongoing series of pseudo-scientific explanations for why this is a bad idea. But really, it's rooted in Islamic law. Islamic law forbids women to go out without permission of the male guardian. Now, this has not been interpreted in other Muslim countries as meaning that they can't drive, but the Saudis do see it that way because they think, well, if you let women drive, then they can just go anywhere they want without the required male supervision. And they make up these increasingly ridiculous excuses to try to justify this.
Yeah, it's amazing to me. Again, there are allies for peace. We have this wonderful relationship with Saudi Arabia, and I remember when Barack Obama met the king, he literally did a very deep bow from the waist when he was meeting this guy. And I look at how they treat women. I look at what they do to homosexuals. I look what they do if you come into that country and you're found with a Bible. How are they able to get away with this ally relationship? Because it seems to me this would be a country we wouldn't want to have anything to do with.
Well, if we had a sane foreign policy, that would be true. If George W. Bush, right after 9/11, had instituted serious programs on the level of the Manhattan Project to find alternative energy sources and utilize them to free us from foreign policy dependence upon these people, then we might be down the road on that by now and able to free ourselves. But unfortunately, we're so beholden to them in regard to oil that they have an increasingly ominous influence over American foreign policy.
And I do know that there's something that happens within Islam, and maybe you can explain this to our listeners. It's the Islamic version of the tithe, whereby a portion of all profits made as a Muslim go to charity. In the case of Saudi Arabia, I believe that a portion of their, charity money goes to establishing mosques here in the United States. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right, Brian. It's what you're talking about is zakat, which is one of the 5 pillars of Islam, the requirement to pay alms, which is a state-required thing in most Muslim countries, that Muslims have to pay 2.5% of their income every year to Islamic charities, or to give it to the state to disperse it to Islamic charities. The Saudis use this money, as you say, to build mosques in the West and to make sure that those mosques adhere to the very virulent and violent Saudi understanding of Islam. And unfortunately also many Islamic charities in the West that have taken this money, they have ended up being shut down for funneling that money to terrorist groups. Just recently, last week, the Islamic Society of North America, the Canada branch, was stripped of its charitable status by the Canadian government for funding Islamic Jihad terror activities in Pakistan with the charitable contributions.
Now, tomorrow, you're going to be speaking to the Conservative Forum. And by the way, you can go online, folks, theconservativeforum.com. We'll post it at KSFO as well. This will be a 7 o'clock event. Doors will open at 6:15, and that's when you can hear Robert Spencer. You're going to be talking about politically correct, political correctness versus Islam and jihad, etc. And Robert, there's a whole lot of that going on here in this country, isn't there?
Oh, very much so. what I'm saying quite bluntly is that denial about the jihad threat kills. And the primary focus of the talk will be the Boston Marathon bombings and how the Russians gave us repeated warnings about the Tsarnaev brothers who carried out those bombings. And the FBI did not follow up or investigate. Not coincidentally, right at the same time, the FBI was ordered by the Obama administration to scrub all training materials of any mention of Islam and jihad in connection with terrorism. So I contend that the Russian warnings about these guys being in jihad groups were dismissed by the FBI because they knew, well, jihad, we just don't deal with that. It's too hot to handle, and they're forbidden to look into it.
Robert Spencer, he'll be at the Conservative Forum tomorrow. Robert, look forward to your visit. Appreciate you being with us on KSFO. Of course, his most recent book, Not Peace But a Sword, The Great Chasm Between Christianity and Islam. We're going to have a ticket giveaway, lunch at the Hyatt in Santa Clara in just a moment. But right now, it's 7 minutes.